Hello, happy Friday again. I'm Anne with Memoir Mentors and Personal Chapters. Today I was having a today I was having a Zoom meeting with a client, and she's also a good friend. And I admitted to Teresa that I have not set aside any time to do my own writing projects, my own personal projects. And she said something that kind of caught me by surprise, but it shouldn't have because I preach this all the time myself. And that comment was make time. You'd better do it before you don't have time to do it. And she explained that she's had two friends recently that got some devastating news in the form of a devastating illness, disease, um, or even a death. So she was totally right, and that's what I'd like to urge you all to do today. Try to capture your stories before you run out of time. Or if you have a loved one who is suffering some kind of illness or on hospice care, sit with that loved one and try to pull out their stories if you can, and give them some affirmations and just some general joy for life and a life well lived. Today, I'm going to give you an example of the kind of things that you can do with stories that will bring you some healing. I the one writing project that I did accomplish this year in the middle of tons of volunteer work and trying to plan an event and facilitate that event, the one thing I did was I wrote and submitted an essay for a contest, a writing contest. And I was totally shocked when it won a third place in theme, the special theme for the year in the prose division. So I'm going to share that with you because it illustrates the point that we can deal with grief and and other troubles in our lives by writing about it, getting it out of our heads and our hearts, where sometimes we just keep stewing about it, and then we can get it onto the paper and let it go. And I was surprised that I wrote this because it occurred so long after my mother's death. I thought that I had already dealt with that, made my peace with it, but there must have been something nagging me that needed to be resolved or recorded. So the entry that I submitted was called My Mother's Lips. Her lips. I can't stop staring at my mother's lips. I guess they've been glued shut in evenly spaced intervals, mathematically spaced intervals. I had no idea that's what happens when a mortician prepares a body for cremation. My stepfather and I stand in the basement of the mortuary, just outside the embalming room. Mother lies on a cart in the hallway, her body shrouded in a coarse white sheet with only her head and bare shoulders showing, and I fixate on her chapped lips. I can see dark spaces between dabs of glue. I'm horrified at myself, but I can't tear my eyes away from lips that once sang hymns of praise and recited original poetry. Finally, after an awkward silence in this hallway of death, my gaze moves to the platinum hair, dried from decades of covering the mousy brown that she always hated. I reach up to smooth it. We've been invited down here to say our last goodbyes, but we're both just standing here awkwardly. What do you say to a body in a basement? To lips and a face and hair that you once knew so well, but that suddenly don't look the least bit familiar. Who are you talking to anyway? And for whose benefit? The woman lying on this sterile cart is not my mother. My mother's words, her paintings, her poetry, her prose, all our plans to go to writers' retreats and shopping trips and do mother-daughter things that we missed in years of my adolescent angst and her search for just the right husband to support 4 kids and her artistic and creative pursuits, all that's just gone. Cancer closed her lips after it ate away insidiously at her bones over the last 3 years. One day she was 71, climbing on the roof of the house she and my stepfather shared in Columbia, Missouri, working like a man, scurrying up and down a ladder and using a nail gun to fasten asphalt shingles to particle board, hurrying like heck before the neighbors reported them for not getting a city permit to build on a room. A few months later, she was going for chemo treatments and trying to find someone to take over her duties as editor of an anthology for the writers group she belonged to. 2 years later, she's just gone. Now she's down in a basement of a funeral home with her lips glued shut. I lived 3 hours away, and the small town newspaper I owned made it difficult to be with her in the last days. There was no other family member close by to ease her into her final months on Earth. Just hospice volunteers, once the chemo drugs stopped working. I came as often on weekends as possible, and those were wonderful visits. We looked through photo albums, picked out funeral hymns, and just sat in comfortable silence in the new sunroom to look at her unfinished paintings and her unfinished memoir. The easy quiet of those last precious weekends contrasted greatly with the violent drama of our early history. We wasted so many years keeping each other at arm's length, blaming each other for past errors and omissions. She had me when she was only 18, then couldn't cope when I was a colicky crybaby for the first 8 months of my life. She stopped coping for real when my dad abandoned the family by dying in an accident when I was 4. My baby brother was 2, and she was only 22. A string of moves, failed, and abusive relationships followed quickly, along with 3 more babies. By the time I left home for college, I had slapped the dysfunctional label on our family and given up entirely on the mother-daughter bond. I soon found my own forever family, marrying the oldest son of a big Catholic family, thinking, incorrectly, that doing so would ensure a functional and happily ever after life. I found a substitute mother in my new mother-in-law and left my own in the recesses of memory and occasional guilt-induced contact. That is, until my second husband, whose mother he adored but who had died, urged me constantly to call my own. Eventually, a stronger mother-daughter bond emerged. We did go to writers' conferences together. We went on at least one shopping trip together. We really got reacquainted over a long trip to Texas for my niece's wedding. I took piano and organ lessons as an adult. So did Mother. She joined a writers' group in her hometown and let the talent emerge that had showed promise early in her young life when she had secretly written poetry and entered essay contests. She began writing columns for my newspaper until her cancer treatments made her too sick to continue. Mother's writing career ended way too soon, and she died way too young at 73. We had so much we wanted to do together, so much making up for lost time. Mother knew my weeks were ruled by Tuesday night newspaper deadlines. Out of subconscious consideration, because she was in a coma at the end, she waited until Wednesday to make her final exit. That morning, after a grueling deadline complicated by a computer breakdown, my husband and I sat at breakfast. Bleary-eyed, I was on a second cup of coffee when a door in the basement of our house slammed shut. It was June. The air conditioner was running. There were no windows open down there. It was precisely 8 a.m. 5 minutes later, my stepfather called. Mother had passed away at exactly the minute the door had slammed. He reported that her eyes suddenly opened wide, and with a startled gasp, she left us. And now here we are down in this dark space, saying goodbye, or at least pretending to. But I know that goodbyes aren't necessary. She isn't gone. And my mother is certainly not inhabiting what's left behind in those chapped, glued-together lips and that dry hair. I do not say goodbye to my mother's body. That would be a sham, a gesture as empty as her clay house is now. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, I assumed the chore of living out her unfinished, unspoken, and unwritten projects. I have a book of her essays and poems to compile and publish. Her cross-stitch quilt is stored in a plastic bag in a closet, only half embroidered. I should finish that. The hymns that she played on her home organ will now need to relocate to my piano so I can play them in sorrow while she listens from a new dimension. I know that finishing my mother's songs and words and creation is the more important goodbye. My acts of love and my duties as a scribe will be and have been repeated perpetually through the ages by other daughters and sons for their own mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and even for the orphans and the homeless, and all those with no one to record their slots of time and space. All of us have stories to tell, and I now feel some compulsion to encourage the telling, even as I go about this individual act of storytelling and preservation. As I write something nearly every day, as I dream in the essence of story and breathe out God's inspirations, I know my mother smiles her approval. She smiles from ear to ear, from radiant lips no longer glued shut. She has given me her voice, her words, aspirations, ambitions, and longings. She now lives on in me, and I will honor her in the only way I know. I hope that you have enjoyed that, and I hope that it made you think about your own needs to preserve the stories of a loved one or your own stories before your lips are shut for the last time. So I hope to see you again next week. Have a great week, a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the fall weather, and we'll see you next time.